Hi everyone, welcome to the mobile security class. In today's lecture, we're going to talk about the security issues of Wi-Fi connections. You might heard a lot about the security advices about Wi-Fi connections. For example, you should always be very careful when you try to connect to the public Wi-Fi in the coffee shop or in the airport. But why? And how can attackers launch attacks when you are using Wi-Fi connections? So in today's lecture, we're gonna talk about what's really behind the Wi-Fi connections and what kind of security problems does Wi-Fi might have, and why would we always suggest people not to connect to Wi-Fi randomly. So first, we'll talk about the basic security considerations in Wi-Fi. And we'll talk about how to evaluate the security of the Wi-Fi and also the known vulnerabilities of Wi-Fi connections nowadays. As usual, before we talk about the technical content, I want to make a few announcements. Another reminder that homework 1 is due on September 13th. And we currently have a website for you to submit your homework. I think you guys have received an email about the homework assignment. So just submit your homework and collab. And also, if you'll be late for the homework assignment, please refer to the following link to see the late policy of this class. And if you have any question, let me know. We have only less than 1 week for the homework. Another announcement is about the project. So the project introduction presentation is due on September 20th. And you should always make an appointment with me to discuss projects before you start. I know some students have talked to me, but in case you haven't, please stop by or just make an appointment. Email me to discuss projects before you really start putting together all the presentations. And the video or video links must be submitted to the collab set by September 20th, and you should also submit a copy of your presentation so that it can be graded easily. And we'll have a template for the project introduction presentation, and be sure to talk to me. So to understand the security issues of Wi-Fi, first we want to know what is Wi-Fi and how does Wi-Fi work. So Wi-Fi is a wireless local area network connectivity suite based on the 802.11 family of standards. You might have heard that Wi-Fi has many different standards, like 802.11, it has A, B, G, and N as of now. And these different protocols provide local access by providing the lower layer services like the physical layer, the link layer, and MAC layer for host access point connectivity. So basically, you can see that you have different devices, especially mobile devices, and you want to connect to the internet. So Wi-Fi is provided by the router, which we also call like access point in your home, and you can connect to the access point, and then you'll be redirected to the internet connectivities. When we talk about the lower layer services, I wonder how many of you has taken introduction to network classes, but I think most of you know the 7-layer model for the network. So in the OSI model, we have 7 layers. From up to top and up to down is application layer, presentation layer, session layer, transport layer, network layer, data link layer, and physical layer. Because Wi-Fi only matters at the lower layer, so we only talk about the last 2 layers, the physical layer and data link layer. Especially data link layer can be divided into LLC and MAC. So LLC is a logical link control, and MAC is a medium access control. I think most of you might already know about the different network layers, but if you don't, we will explain the details about the physical layer and data link layer. So in the next few slides, we will call LLC just as link layer for simplicity, but you know it's only part of the data link layer. So first, let's take a look at the layer under all the layers, which is the physical layer. So the Wi-Fi physical layer is responsible for transmission of raw bits and symbols between host and access point. So the physical layer had to manage transmission and reception and perform bit to symbol and also inverse mappings and bit stream handoff with layer 2. So basically you can see that the physical layer for the Wi-Fi is 802.11 ABNG, but for the wired connections, it could be the fiber. So you can see it's very low level. It's just transforming the physical information to the digital information. So physical layer is really important because it transmits and receives all the symbols of bits, and it also manages the radio interface. For example, the signal strings, the bandwidth, the phase synchronization, and also carrier sensing, spectrum allocation, all these kind of things. If you wonder what's the difference between A, B, N, and G for the 802.11, the difference is majorly they work on a different frequency. So, so they are divided by different frequency, take up different bandwidths. Physical layer will also take control of signal processing like filtering, training, plus shipping, and also modulation, and also coding. So physical layer is really critical. And also, because it's performing so many important tasks, physical layer also have lots of security challenges. For example, how can we prevent a curious or malicious party from listening to all Wi-Fi transmissions? And how can we prevent people from injecting message into the link layer? And how can we prevent people from interfering with Wi-Fi transmissions and receptions? For example, someone might send out signals to actually interrupt and even break the Wi-Fi transmissions. Now let's look at the upper layers, the MAC layer, and also the link layer. So together they form the data link layer for Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi link layer which is the LLC we previously mentioned, is responsible for managing interaction between mobile terminals and access point. How do we mean by managing? So link layer had to manage the following things: the channel and link formation and management, and also it also needs to send information to the media access and also have network access control. So link layer is very critical. For example, we can see that link layer security majorly focuses on the access control and encryption, which is basically the management functionalities. For example, in the private Wi-Fi systems, access is controlled by a shared key, identity credentials, or proof of payment. So basically, if you have a Wi-Fi, for example, you have Xfinity Wi-Fi in your home, then you also have you have to set up the key for people to get access to. So that's similar here. The authentication for the link layer is of user or device only. But sometimes the mutual authentication may be desired or required by some users and devices. Link layer should also provide confidentialities and integrity over the wireless link. So when we think about confidentiality, I think we also talked in the first few lectures that confidentiality means nobody other than the user and service provider can, or even just the user, can know the content in the transmission and content in the storage. And integrity means no attacker can really modify a message or modify a piece of information that's stored. So since one Wi-Fi access point could connect to multiple different users, and the Wi-Fi link is also responsible to share medium among untrusted Wi-Fi users. For example, if you have a Wi-Fi setup in your home, and sometimes your family, of course, your family member might be trusted, but sometimes other people, like even friends, want to access to Wi-Fi, but they might be doing something bad as well. You can see there are for these three small parts. For now, for this lecture, actually we only focus on the Wi-Fi link. So we suppose everything is good and the physical layer and MAC layers, and only focus on the Wi-Fi link. That's because the Wi-Fi link layer is really the most critical part for managing the authentication encryptions. So basically, there are lots of security problems just with the Wi-Fi link layer. So let's zoom in a little bit closer. So now let's zoom in a little bit closer to see how Wi-Fi really works. So basically, first, when you start trying to connect to an access point, what the device will do is sending lots of probing requests. So by the probing request, I mean that the device tries to find access point that it has connected to before. For example, the device might connect it to some Starbucks Wi-Fi and also like some Xfinity Wi-Fi, and then they will store the name of this Wi-Fi. And now when the device try to connect to Wi-Fi again, it will first start from the Wi-Fi it has connected to before. So basically, the device will send out a list of access points, the name of access points that he has connected to before. And once an access point responds, because it's the access point that the device was requesting, then the device will send authentication request to the access point. Of course, if there's no Wi-Fi that the device has connected to before, the device will just try to connect to a new access point, and the new access point will also be responding to devices also as authentication request. So in the authentication request, if the device user doesn't really care about security, he or she don't need to send out any credentials. So if you see some Wi-Fi access point that is not protected by password, so sometimes it's just because people are not so careful, but sometimes because it might be access point from an attacker, so that you should not connect to it, because there will not be any encryption at all, so that attackers will be able to just get data by listening to the traffic. Well, with that being said, let's see what if in a normal process, in a secure more or less secure scenario, the device sends authentication request with credentials. So the credential will be sent to access point, and access point will forward this to the local AAA server. So what we mean by AAA here is that it's not the insurance company you are thinking about, but it means this server can provide authentication, authorization, and accounting services. Basically, this local AAA server will forward the request to the home AAA server, and home AAA server will make authorization deletion and generate the master key for access point and send it to the local AAA server. So local AAA server serve like a proxy, and local AAA server will send out the deletion and master key for access point. Now, the access point and the device will reach an agreement, and they will derive the key together based on the master key. Note that here, the key, the final key that's used for encrypting the traffic is actually the same for all the devices. Different devices connect to the same access point. Can you think about the problem here? We'll talk a lot more about the details, but one thing to note is that first, the key generated is not unique for each device. So many devices are sharing the same key, which means other devices can also decrypt the content for the user's device, as long as it can get access to access point. Even worse, you might be able to tell that it's only the device that's authenticated. The access point is not really authenticated, so it's not a mutual authentication. Let's see more details. Previously, the most popular standard for the encryption here is called WEP. So basically, the real name is Wired Equivalent Privacy. So as the name suggests, the WEP aims to make the easy task of accessing wireless local area network traffic much more difficult, as similar to wired. So basically, WEP defines encryption and authentications, and the steps in the last steps can be supported by WEP. And we can also tell that the authentication is just like a challenge response to proof knowledge of a shared secret key. So basically, the device sends out authentication request to access point, showing that it has the shared key. Of course, if the access point is not protected by password, the device can just send authentication request without a password. That's even worse. Even if the device and access point they are using encryptions, however, the encryption still have some problems. First, we mentioned that the encryption is always use the same key between different devices, and also it's used a very simple cipher, RC4 stream cipher. You can take a look at more details, but this is the kind of stream cipher that we don't recommend you to use because it has lots of security problems. Let's see a little bit more details. You know that the WEP uses challenge response authentication, and it's also using XOR for the result. So there are several issues. The first issue I have pointed out is that authentication is not mutual. Only user is authenticated, but not the access point. So basically, you can know the identity of the user, but you don't really know the identity of access point. Do you still remember in the telecom security lecture, we talked about similar problem when the authentication is not mutual. For example, that time it's a base station is not mutual. What happened? It's like the authentication on the base station is not mutual. So remember that we said it can be a ROG base station, basically a fake base station that try to collect users' data. Here it's similar, because authentication is not mutual and the access point is not authenticated, then it's possible for attackers to fake an access point and get users' data. We'll talk about lots of details about how a ROG access point can really work. The second problem I also pointed out is that the authentication and encryption of different devices are definitely using the same secret key. So which means that if in your network that connect to all, like there are so many devices connect to one access point, which is quite common. Well, if the secret key is always the same, then that means an attacker can just get into access point and will be able to decrypt all other people's information as well. The third problem is that the authentication only occurs on initial connections. There's actually no updates, like no re-authenticate when device had long time connect to the Wi-Fi, which is not good because sometimes device can be hacked and the key can be lost. Well, the WEP won't support you to really update the keys. The fourth issue is that WEP uses RC4 stream cipher with XOR. Well, attackers might be able to get the content C and also the R, which is C XOR key. And actually, the attacker will be able to get the key, right? Because XOR is actually linear, so that it's very easy to generate key. Also, the attacker will be able to authenticate in future sections, just use the same initial vector from R. And since the secret key is shared, attacker can just spoof anyone. You don't know which one is the attacker. You have to really think all the devices are now trusted and this time. I'm not sure how many of you have the basic background knowledge for stream cipher. Because in like initial vector IV is a very important concept in stream cipher. So basically means the IV should be keeps adding, so that, for example, IV will be from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 every time a new message is encrypted, so that attackers cannot easily just use cannot easily reverse the key directly. If you want to learn more details, there are some interesting online course about crypto. But if you think you really need to know all the details in the class, please let me know. I can change the lectures accordingly to include more content about crypto. Okay, so we already talked about the problem with authentication. Now let's talk about the other two security problems. The first one is the problem with integrity protection. How does WIP do integrity protection? The integrity protection actually based on the integrity check value, which is based on CRC. So anyone know what CRC is? Let's first look at how do they encrypt the message. So the message M is actually will be combined with the CRC checksum of the message, and then XOR with a key to get encrypted message. However, there's nothing to protect against replays. For example, attackers can just replay the message, and they can actually get access to the Wi-Fi as well, because you cannot check the integrity. The integrity checking will pass, because there's nothing about the time for the WP integrity protection. Nowadays, if we want to prevent against replay, we usually have a time step, which should be included. For example, if you send a message and 1 p.m., the integrity check value should be different if you send a message at 2 p.m. so that attackers cannot just replay the information to take benefits from the system. Another very big problem is that the CRC, this checksum computation, is actually linear. For example, if you compute the checksum CRC of X XOR Y, it's same as if you compute the CRC for X and for Y and then XOR these two things. Now, can you see the problem here? Let me rephrase it. So CRC is linear, so which means that if you modify a bit in the message, and you basically will know which bit in the checksum, in the integrity check value, will be modified. So, for example, attackers can just fake a piece of message, and he knows how to modify the integrity check value to pass the integrity check easily, because CRC is linear. So basically, WET integrity protection will not work at all. Okay, so integrity is not secure. How about the confidentiality? The confidentiality, which means that attackers cannot see users' communication information, and the confidentiality is handled by the initial vectors of WEP, the IVs. So the IV for WEP actually is short. It repeats every few hours per user. And remember that all users have the same secret key. Like the small range of IVs make it even worse. The second issue is that the IV will start from 0, and for each packet, IV will just at 1. So for every user, it's the same kind of process. And attackers can just inject the messages on time because he knows, okay, I will just use this IV, and I will just encrypt the data like this. The third problem is that the use for the RC4 stream cipher is inappropriate. Especially, it's using weak keys of RC4. So basically, WP don't use RC4 securely, and it's actually use a weak key and also small number of IVs. So, which means attackers can recover the entire secret key. So basically, first, we would not suggest people to use RC4. It is a very old crypto algorithm, and it has all kinds of problems if you don't use it properly, and within the increasement of the computation power of different devices, it's also vulnerable to be broken. And if you're using RC4, a thing to remember is that you should always use the strong keys, And also, you should always have really long IVs. But let's see how to solve the WEP problems, since they have all problems for authentication, for integrity check, and also for confidentiality. How can we improve it? Realizing the problems of the WEP, then IEEE proposed specifications for better security of wireless local area network. So the new standard is called IEEE 802.11i. So basically, there are lots of specifications about how to do authentication and access control. And actually, the 11i protocol was based on like 1x protocol. So which means it's reuse all the authentication and access control defined in 809.1x, but extended into the wireless connections. And also, in this new set of protocols, instead of using RC4, which had lots of security problems, they're using a better crypto technology, which is called AES, for integrity protection and also confidentiality protections as well. So since the 11i was based on 1x, let's talk a little bit about what is 1x, how does it do authentication and access control. So basically, for the authentication and access control, there are three important components here. The first component is called supplicant, so which is the authentication and authorization entity on the wireless devices. So that's the devices that are trying to get access to Wi-Fi, and it has a supplicant which take care of the authentication or authorizations. For the second part, authenticator, so which is authentication and authorization entity in the basically in the wired access network. For us, it's access point. For wired connection, it's probably base station or router. And also, it has the third component, which is account authority. So which is a trusted third party in the Wi-Fi or internet. So it can authenticate credentials and authorize services and tabs, and sometimes maybe even handle key management. Let's see how does the details of the network access control in the new standard. So there are several protocols related. The first protocol is extensible authentication protocols. This is a basic kind of protocols, provide end-to-end authentication. That's basically between the devices and also account authenticators. And EAP supports a variety of client-server authentication methods. And then, of course, it's 11i protocol. Basically, 11i implement EAP over the wireless LAN link between device and access point. So the 11i requires session key per station. Comparing to the wired, it's usually for wires per wire ports, but for the wireless connection, we can only do it per station instead of per port. And also the radius protocol. Radius protocol transports EAP between AP and also account authenticator. So you can see from the figure to see a little bit more details. But the key was also communicated between access point and account authenticator by radius. Although the 11i is much secure and provide better services for authentication, integrity check, and also confidentiality. However, the RC4 which is used in WEP, and AES, which is used in the 11i, are all implemented in hardware. So it's not so easy to just upgrade from WEP to 11i because it takes time for people to really upgrade the hardware, much more difficult than just upgrade the software. And so it's why that there are lots of devices trying to be backward compatible and still support WEP. However, things are moving fast. Let's see how much has been implemented in Wi-Fi now for 11i. So basically, in the transition, there's a protocol called temporary key integrity protocol, so which is 11i that's still using RC4 instead of AES. So yeah, so without hardware upgrade, you can just do firmware upgrade to use the TKIP, and WPA actually implements the subset of 11i using TKIP. Better late than never, right? You still have some part inside, that's good. And the authentication access control in WPA and 11i are the same. It's just like the encryption underneath is still RC4, not AES. And the integrity and confidentiality check are based on TKIP. And when time moves to WPA2, it's implemented full flag of 11i. However, is the 11i properly secure? Not really. WPA2 also have some weakness. We'll talk about more details about that. First, in the following slides, we want to answer a question. Is Wi-Fi, if it's using the latest 802.11i, is it secure? Let's think about more details in the real scenarios. So let's think about this scenario. First, the laptop can connect to any open access point, and there's an open access point. The name is network X, and there's another access point named attacker. Of course, the laptop will not connect to the attacker, and the laptop wants to connect to the network X. However, the attacker can also change the name to network X. How can the laptop know which one it should connect to? Another scenario is that, okay, so this is a laptop that should only connect to company Wi-Fi. And also, the laptop might want to connect to a personal Wi-Fi, my Wi-Fi. So basically, if the laptop connect to the my Wi-Fi as well, will it give access to like the personal access point to the intranet of the company? So basically, if we think about the two scenarios, there's two kinds of access point. The first, attacker's access point, and the second, personal access point, can be both considered as rogue AP. So basically, it's any unauthorized access point that either attracts users for malicious purposes or offers network connectivity that should not be offered. For example, the personal Wi-Fi might not be an attacker, but it just provides network services to the users. Then the user's device will get connected to this personal Wi-Fi, and the personal Wi-Fi might have some security problems, even if it's not from an attacker, but it might be vulnerable to some of the attacks. Then it's possible like the company data can also be disclosed. Most of the rogue access point attacks actually happen in the public. That's why we usually tell people did not connect to the Wi-Fi in the public areas. So basically, these APs try to attract users to access and control and also even block session traffic. And they can recover user credentials once users start using this Wi-Fi. And also they can launch denial of service or degradation of services, and also bypassing additional secure features. Well, there are also some attacks in the interface, second scenarios. So the ROG APs in the interface network, so employees should always attach to cooperative networks, should always use cooperative networks for work. And sometimes maybe you have the free internet access for you and your friends. Can you think about what could go wrong? It's actually you just have a corporate backdoor inside the enterprise, and there are lots of malicious action could happen in the backdoor. The attacker can just maliciously attract company employees, which will end up have data leakage and even corporate espionage. So we already talked about the two scenarios where ROG AP can take charge. Then how to connect a ROG, how to really create a ROG AP. It's also simple and cheap. So first, you can set up an access point, either with competing or collating SSID and configuration. So remember that you should not trying to attract other people's traffic. We'll just tell you how to create ROG AP, but it doesn't mean that you should use this technology to attack others. So please check the course policy for how to do security research without affecting others. And after setting up the access point, you can create or modify to redirect user to a splash page if needed. So now you already get the ROG AP working. How to get people connect to the ROG AP? You can actually visit target sites. For example, you can go to Starbucks, you can go to airport, or you don't have to really visit the target site if you have signal amplifier, which amplify your signal, and directional antenna, which can actually amplify signal and direct that to the users you want to attack. And you can steal credentials and do DDoS, man-in-the-middle attack once users really connect to your access point. And how can we detect AP? First, of course, trying to detect whether the AP follow the policies. For example, if the policies no Wi-Fi in this area, then any Wi-Fi signal should raise an alert, and you should immediately check whether there's a ROG AP in your area, or whether there's a ROG AP that trying to amplify signal and sending to the target area. And another thing to notice that sometimes you might observe multiple duplicate SSIDs. So it might be attackers trying to use the legal SSID people always connect to. For example, maybe you go to Starbucks, then you have Starbucks and Starbucks, maybe Starbucks 1, Starbucks 2, this kind of duplicate or really similar SSIDs. So that might be a bad signal as well. And also, if you know the MAC address of the access point, you can see whether it's mismatching. And there are also other kind of things you can observe the behaviors to really see what's happening. Especially for the enterprise scenarios, you can match wireless traffic for the non-cooperative SSID with the traffic seen inside cooperative network to see how much data was disclosed. So these are the things, how can we detect a ROG AP, and how can we So we have talked about how to detect the ROG AP. Now we talk about how can we defend against the ROG AP. One good thing with 11i is that it really has a strong link level authentication. So basically, most cases 11i supports the mutual authentication before users, devices, and access point, which means it's become more difficult to launch a ROG AP attack with 11i. However, if the authentication is not really used, for example, in public Wi-Fi, what can we do? So basically, for the public network, it's not protected by the encryption and authentications. So the current defense still do not work. That's why we are always be careful. Do not connect to the public Wi-Fi. Even worse, what if the ROG AP is actually set up by the employee? How can you really defend against it? It might look really legal. You can think about these problems. And now we will move on to other vulnerabilities with 11i besides the ROG AP problem. So, as we talked in the beginning of this lecture, for the Wi-Fi access, it's usually one access point will connect, many different devices will connect to one access point. So, basically, you can see sometimes one access point will take more than 10 devices will connect to it, and it creates some problems. What's the problem? So usually, even in the WPA2, the latest one, which implement 11i, so it uses two types of encryption and also two types of encryption keys. You can see that the first type of key is a pairwise transit key. You can see from left side. So when the access point is want to send some messages to both client 1 and client 2, it will use unicast. So basically, it will send two messages, one to the client 1, which is encrypted by the key with client 1, the PTK1, and another message to client 2 directly with the key as PTK2 to client 2. And otherwise, it will be, so basically, the message will not influence each other, so, and also client 2 and client 1 cannot see the content of each other, even if it's about the same things. So for the second kind of key is a group temporal key. So it's actually similar to WEP because the key is shared. So the client 1 and client 2 will have the same key. Well, this kind of things will be really bad. As we mentioned that when we talk about WEP, we already said, okay, you don't know what other attackers' identity are, other client identity are, so you don't know which one you should trust. So you should have some kind of isolation between different devices, right? With GTK, there are lots of more problems that are possible. So malicious insiders can actually misuse GTK. So basically, if the GTK can be combined with ARP poisoning, so the malicious insider, for example, the client 1 can be an attacker and do ARP poisoning, which will advertise itself as the gateway. So because the GTK is shared, so that the victim, the clone 2, cannot tell whether it's a real AP or not, real gateway or not. And it's actually, I think I have had a reading material, so there are lots more details described to do how to do ARP poisoning, and actually how does this attack exactly happen that can really treat the victim to believe that the attacker is a gateway and communicate with the attacker. So the name hole 196 is actually named from the page number, where the vulnerability is actually buried in the 11i standard. And it's a general problem. It's implementation independent, so all the 11 protocol will have the problem. Of course, currently this hole is patched. The way they patch the problem is first to have client isolation, but they don't actually have a standard approach to logically separate clients. So this depends on different implementations of different service providers. And another thing is that they suggest not to use GTK and trade the encrypted broadcast for the multiple encrypt unicast. So it's just a little bit more traffic that will be sent, and a little bit more overhead on the access point, but it makes it much secure. Another technology is the Wi-Fi hotspot. I think some of you guys have used it before. So which means that you usually have a device. That device have connection to the cellular data, and the device will want to share the data access to other devices. So basically, serve as access point to send out the information. There are also lots of problems with hotspot security. For example, what will look like a rogue hotspot access point. But we will not talk about all the problem here, and I will just leave it for you guys to read. In the end, so this lecture we talked only about the link level security problems, because the link level take charge of authentication and authentication, authorization, integrity, and confidentiality, all the important security features. But that does not mean that the physical layer and MAC layers are not important for the security. For example, it's possible that an attacker could really jam the traffic and also cheat. The way they do is they can have direct antenna, and they actually send out information at the same frequency, so that the legal traffic will be blocked. With that, we want to finish today's lecture. So basically, we talked about several important things. The first thing is that how does Wi-Fi work? How does Wi-Fi connect? How does Wi-Fi allows devices through through access point to connect to the internet? And the second important topic is that we talk about the traditional encryption protocols for Wi-Fi, which is WEP, and we talk about lots of security problems with WEP, including first using RC4 and also using RC4 to do integrity check and also do encryption, and also even with RC4 they didn't use it properly. They use weak they use weak keys, and also they use really short IVs, and also the keys between the keys in different devices are the same, which cause lots of problems. We then talk about improvement in 11i. So basically 11i used AES to replace RC4 and also make other improvement for mutual authentication between devices and access point. This is really critical because it helps to detect ROG AP attacks. And also, we also talk a little bit more about how does ROG AP work in Wi-Fi, and how helpful is the 11i, and how can we defend and detect the ROG AP access. And in the end, we talk a little bit more about the potential problems with 11i, and also the solutions about 11i, fixing 11i security as well. Of course, there are always new problems and vulnerabilities, but I want you to learn is that how can we really find out the problem. So, for example, we find out the problem. We always talk about authentication should be mutual. So once authentication is not mutual, there could be a problem. And another thing you should always keep in mind is that the clients cannot be trusted. So basically, you want to isolate different clients and using different keys to communicate with different clients. I hope you learn a little bit more about Wi-Fi security, and you know why people should not connect to the Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi, and why people should always connect to Wi-Fi with really carefully. And in the next lecture, we will talk about the privacy issues of Wi-Fi. So remember that we actually say that when a device wants to connect to an access point, the first thing the device will do is that device will send out probing requests, which is actually broadcasting all the access point it has connected to before. So basically that discloses lots of information about the device, about the user, and we will discuss more details about what kind of information we can generate from the Wi-Fi information. And remember that the project intro presentation due on September 20th, and you should always come and talk to me if you haven't picked up a project yet, or if you have any problem coming up with a project idea. So just send me an email. Okay, thank you so much.